massive dumps.
There's some whores in this house. Wet ass keyboard.
Mike Pounds.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person. Yosemite's one of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Mike Lindell's a conspiracy.
Well, you haven't. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. They said nobody gets it in order. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Amazing.
He can't sit down. He's got a burning in his butthole. He's got a fire. He's got a flame coming out of his butthole.
Big massive dumps.
Oh, I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism.
Somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing.
You see, this is a simple meme that you would find on the internet, but this meme is very real.
You ain't seen nothing yet until you see the flaming butthole.
Putting us on our knees to China.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Nancy Pelosi's gazpacho police.
There's insanity in the control room.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, everybody, welcome to the show. We're gonna have a fun one. It's Tuesday. We got a lot of stuff here. We got Republican culture war du jour going on today. So we're gonna have fun breaking that down, including Republicans attempting to pass a law that legalizes child marriage. I'm not kidding. That's what's happening. We're going to talk about that. That's fascinating and also horrifying. We have QAnon. We've got, yes, pro-Russia Republicans, of course. Marjorie Taylor Greene saying horrible things. Peter Doocy versus Jen Psaki. Fun times. And voter fraud. Interesting. Double voting even. Oh, yeah. So here we go. All right. Now, a couple of things here. Let's go back to the chat because I saw something interesting. In fact, I always see interesting stuff in the chat. Oh, yeah. Who's the pastor guy? Or, I'm sorry. Who's the flaming butthole guy? That is Pastor Manning, I believe. God, he used to run a show. Maybe he still does. I don't know. But they had this show where he was talking about how apparently if you have gay anal sex, that you're you're gonna have a flame coming out of your butt, or so. I know weird stuff from Pastor Manning. He's hilarious. Also insane. Kind of reminds me of this guy.
Beta.
Yeah. That guy's also insane. Jesse Lee Peterson. But I don't know if I ever talk to Jesse Lee Peterson, the minute he says
Beta male.
I'm going to lose it, and I'm just going to laugh. I mean, seriously, I cannot take people like that seriously. I can't. Like, I will break out into laughter, and I'll just be like, you're such a clown. Oh, I love it. I'm having so much fun. You're such a clown. What a clown. It's hilarious. Man. Yeah. Oh, did Pastor Manning have a stroke or something? Oh, that's, well, I mean, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to be mean, but I also don't want to be nice. But yeah, I would totally laugh at Jesse Lee Peterson if I were talking to him, because I wouldn't take anything that he says seriously. You just can't. You just can't.
Beta bear. Amazing.
No, okay. That's why he's on the soundboard too, because he's funny. All right, anyway. The flaming butthole guy, as I said, Pastor Manning. Okay. Actually, I thought he got in trouble. Like with the law. I'm gonna have to do some a lookup on that guy. But anyway, all right. Anyway, so now, would I laugh at Caleb Maupin for being a Muppet reject? No, I laugh at him for being the Burger King guy. Yeah, Burger King. Burger King or whatever. Yeah, that's what I laugh at. Oh, okay. Anyway. Enough of me being like insufferably mean to people, and let's get to talking about some issues, huh? Now, before I do, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Helps out greatly, as always. All right, that's it. Let's do it. Let's jump in. No, Burger King. It's Burger King. You'd have to look it up. It's burger, but with an O. Burger King. Anyway, I'm stun locked. I'm derailed. Unacceptable. Can't have it. Totally unacceptable. Okay. The devolution of the Republican Party continues. As if you didn't think that they would go, that they have gone low enough. Marjorie Taylor Greene has now decided to attack members of her own party using an incredibly disgusting smear. In fact, this was a tweet put out by Marjorie Taylor Greene's official account. Take a look. Murkowski, Collins, and Romney are pro-pedophile. They just voted for Ketanji Brown Jackson. So already we're starting off on. Wow, I mean, she went there immediately went there. Again, that's in response to Mitt Romney putting out a tweet saying, "I will support the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson." Look, so let me just say, I'm not a fan of any of these people. All right, I'm not a fan of Mitt Romney. I'm not a fan of Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins, and I'm definitely not a fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene. But calling them pro-pedo is absolutely disgusting. There's no truth in that whatsoever. Mitt Romney might wear special weirdo underwear, but there's no evidence that he goes after children. I mean, it's really insane. Again, ton of things that I don't disagree with on, or that I don't agree with them on them policy-wise, but what she is doing is straight up pedo-jacketing them. And so what that is that basically they're making vague assertions and innuendos and things like that to claim that people that are working with the Democrats and Democrats are pro-pedophiles and are pedophiles. I mean, what they're doing is that they're literally calling people the worst thing that someone else can call someone. Now, that's why they do it all the time with no evidence. And we saw this during Ketanji Brown Jackson's Senate confirmation hearing. You had people like Lindsey Graham, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, falsely accusing Brown of being lenient, additionally extra lenient, super lenient, in cases involving child sexual abuse. Now, here's the thing, though. What Ketanji Brown Jackson did wasn't even different than what the mainline justices and judges in other cases have done. So she's offered very little deviation from those decisions. And yet, they still use that smear against her because they couldn't find anything else. They couldn't find anything else to attack her on. Nothing of substance, nothing that's real. But it doesn't matter, because here's the thing. This is all about the culture war. The QAnonification of the Republican Party. This is who they are. And yes, there is a reason they do it. They're doing it on purpose. As the New Republic's Melissa Gira Grant, who has been tracking the QAnon inside the Republican Party, noted this. If your enemies are an ill-defined yet pervasive threat to children, what wouldn't be justified in stopping them? Now, think about that for a second. The modern right wing is steeped in guns and fear. Basically, that's it. I mean, what they had, again, you had people that tried to invade the Capitol building based on the false idea that Joe Biden stole the election thanks to, massive non-existent voter fraud. That's a conspiracy theory that made mainstream in the Republican Party. Now, they also believed, some of them, that January 6th was going to be the beginning of the storm, right? The storm. Now, what's the storm? It's the QAnon belief that Donald Trump would begin arresting the alleged satanic pedo Democrats and their Republican enablers. Now, of course, that didn't happen because it's obvious nonsense. It just nonsense conspiracy mongering. But understand that facts don't matter. Policy doesn't matter. They don't have policy to run on. Truth doesn't matter. The only game plan they have to win elections now is to paint the entire left as nothing but child predators. I mean, the whole thing is incredibly gross, especially when you consider some of the credible allegations against Matt Gaetz for literally trafficking a 17-year-old. You have the allegations against Roy Moore. You have allegations against Donald Trump, many others, for alleged sexual impropriety. Did they talk about that? Did they consider? No, of course. Oh, fake news, fake news. What are you talking about? No, look, if you think that they would care at all about hypocrisy, you don't know these current batch of Republicans. These are not your daddy's Republicans. This is not your daddy's Republican Party or your grandpa's Republican Party. No, they are conspiratorial. They run on these insane conspiracy theories. They run on hatred of the other side. There is no compromise when it comes to them. And so they use all of these culture war issues to distract from actual economic issues, because at the end of the day, they use that to distract people from their real purpose, and that's to funnel all the money to the rich. Okay. Whew. Moving on. Oh, it gets worse. Oh, it gets worse. While red states across the country are banning books involving any sort of discussion about LGBT issues, race, and anything else that they might find objectionable, Republican lawmakers in Tennessee have decided that they would like to push a bill that would remove the age requirement for people to get married. Now, of course, not only applies to heterosexual couples, of course. The same bill would also ban gay marriage. HB 233 would basically open up a new classification of common law marriage involving one man, one woman, and perhaps even a child. I'm not kidding. You remove that age requirement, that could happen. Now, opponents of the bill say it would eliminate this age requirement and in some instances open up the door for a cover-up of child sexual abuse. Because of course, right? Really? Now, again, missing from the bill, as people point out, are an age requirement for marriage. It's not hyperbole. It's not an oversight. I wish it was. My God, I wish it was. But no, I'm going to read you a quote here from the sponsor of the bill, Tom Leatherwood, Republican of Arlington. And he's going to point out, like, oh yeah, that there's no age requirement. This bill, here's what he said, quote, "There is not an explicit age limit." Oh. Now he added this, "All this bill does is give an alternative form of marriage for those pastors and other individuals who have a conscientious objection to the current pathway to marriage in our law." Well, what's wrong with the current laws in Tennessee? I mean, yes, in Tennessee, a person can get married to a 17-year-old as long as there is parental consent. But this guy's like, no, let's just not even put an age requirement in there at all. You know, so I guess if you want to get married to that 13-year-old, that's fine. You know, hey, but as long as it's not a gay marriage. See, we draw the line at that. We're not going to let a gay marriage. But, you know, if you're a 30-year-old and you're dating a 16-year-old and you want to marry your dad, oh, that's totally fine. Yeah, we'll let that go. Attaboy. And they're the ones that call gay people predators and groomers. I mean, this is what they consider the party of family values. Now, as I mentioned here before, they've been trying to erase gay and trans people and roll back same-sex rights as a way to quote-unquote protect the children. They all say it. Oh, we're trying to protect the kids. We're trying to protect kids. We're trying to keep them away from the groomers and the pedophiles. And, you know, we're trying to take them away from the predators and, you know, protect them. No, you're opening the door for predators. That's what you're doing. You're trying to legalize child brides. I mean, that's insane. They don't care about children, especially trans children. I mean, again, what this is that this is simply a tool that some of these people, because on a base level, everyone wants to protect children. We all have that drive in common to protect them from predators, to protect them from harm. There are certain people, far-right culture warriors, that exploit that for their own personal or political gain. That's what they're doing. Now, there are Democrats, that, by the way, that push back against this bill, partly, again, because it would block gay marriage, but also because it removes that age limit. In fact, here's Representative Mike Stewart from Nashville. He sits in a subcommittee the bill passed out of and said, look, quote, "I don't think any normal person thinks we shouldn't have an age requirement for marriage. It should not be there, as it's basically a get out of jail free card for people who are basically committing statutory rape." I mean, it's completely ridiculous. So that's another reason why this terrible bill should be eliminated. 100%. But you don't understand. See, the QAnon, Q tells me, in the latest Q drop, it could be even a Q dump, you know.
Dumps.
The biggest dumps, where he says that it's the Democrats that are the child predators. Yes, yeah, because you know, they're trans people in the schools and all that. No, what they want to do is actually, what Democrats want to do is basically say, oh yes, we acknowledge that gay and trans people exist, and maybe we shouldn't, I don't know, ban their existence. I know, controversial. And then Tulsi Gabbard comes out and says, and I didn't get the video for this, and I probably should have. Tulsi Gabbard comes out and says, well, why don't we just ban these discussions? Why don't we take the Florida's Don't Say Gay bill and let's expand it further? Let's do that. Let's expand it to, K through 12 instead of K through 3. Yes, let's do that. Not have any discussions. Progressive my ass. Ridiculous. Now, the Sexual Assault Center of Middle Tennessee, following this, released the following statement about it and said this, quote, "The Sexual Assault Center does not believe the age of consent for marriage should be any younger than it already is. It makes children more vulnerable to coercion and manipulation from predators, sexual and other." And look, he's absolutely right. Or they're right. Look, according to UNICEF, approximately 300,000 girls and boys in the U.S. were married before reaching the age of 18 between 2000 and 2018. Under current Tennessee law, as I mentioned before, one person can get married as young as 17 years old with parental consent. And so, look, getting rid of that, do they not understand how much of a complete and utter hypocrisy this is? And by the way, how much projection this is. The Republican Party, oh yeah, we want to protect children and we want to keep them safe and away from predators. By the way, we're going to open up the way for people to have predators. And just to go and groom and marry children. They think that's totally fine. I'm not saying every Republican thinks that way. No. But there are certain people in power that apparently couldn't wait to legalize child brides. Disgusting. Yeah, it's just like, Afghanistan or some of these other places where you have fundamentalist religion. All right. Speaking of the Don't Say Gay bill, let's get to that. Peter Doocy was recently shut down by White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. So no, I normally do not do a lot of Jen Psaki stories because she's like super, West Wing and she's going to go to MSNBC. But I think that this was actually a really, really good response to her from a ridiculous question posed by Peter Doocy. Without further ado, let's get to it.
So if you guys oppose this law that bans classroom instruction about sexual orientation and gender identity in K through 3, does the White House support that kind of classroom instruction before kindergarten?
Do you have examples of schools in Florida that are teaching kindergartners about sex education?
I'm just asking for the president's opinion.
I think that's a relevant question because I think this is a politically charged, harsh law that is putting parents and LGBTQ plus kids in a very difficult, a heartbreaking circumstance. And so I actually think that's a pretty relevant question.
All right, look, that's a great response. I mean, seriously, what kind of question is that? Oh, yeah, do you think that we should be teaching kindergartners about sex? Do you support that? Well, I mean, first of all, nobody's really pushing that. That's kind of an insane talking point. Again, what we're talking about here is simply acknowledging the existence of gay and trans people. That's not the same as doing a comprehensive sex ed like you would, for example, 16-year-olds in class. Again, it should be taught later on. But look, it's not even as if the kids don't know the difference between boys and girls from an incredibly young age. Any education at that level would have to be pretty basic. If we're talking about like teaching kids about certain things at a K through 3 level, all right, well, for one, you teach kids to respect each other's personal space. You teach them about consent. That's what that is. Okay? And so look, if you're against teaching children consent, and how to deal with unwanted touching, then you might be the problem, not the education. And so in reality, you already have that kind of education going on. And then there's the, what Republicans in Florida are doing. And this is what they're trying to do, okay, with the bills like Don't Say Gay. They want to shut down discussion about, people saying, I have two dads, or I have two moms. They want to ban people from saying that kind of stuff, from talking about those things, about those relationships. And by the way, I wasn't actually making 16-year-old an example of when you should start sex ed. Honestly, I would defer to the professionals on that one and when they say that they should, to be fair. But anyway, look, for the Republicans, though, they do not want to have the discussion on the fact that, again, gay and trans and identity, gender identity, is a thing. And by the way, gender identity is different than sex. I mean, anybody who's out there who's thinking that, like, teachers that are teaching, even basic sex ed are like, oh yeah, so this is how you do it. This is that position and that position. No, that's not what they're doing. It's just basic biology things. But what they don't want, what Republicans don't want them teaching is, again, this is what a transgender person is. This is why you should respect them. This is what, gay people are, what they do. And this is who they are. And that's okay. That's it. What they want to do is completely erase LGBTQIA plus folks. And they use the idea of protecting children as a cover for that hateful agenda. Remember, there are bills like this. If you want to protect kids, well, bills like this kill kids. Okay? Trans kids specifically. White kids, totally fine. White cis male, kids, totally fine. But trans children, again, they're bullied. They end up committing suicide as a result of this hatred that they get, not only from students, but also parents, and even in some cases, teachers. I don't think you all remember, you probably do. There was a former teacher that is running or had run as a Republican in Texas. This is Shelley Luther. I'm going to show you her comments about the trans children in her classroom.
I am not comfortable with the transgenders, the kids that they brought in my classroom when they said that this kid is transgendering into a different sex, that I couldn't have kids laugh at them, like I couldn't have like other kids got in trouble for having transgender kids in my class. That's why I vote for school choice. And my opponent is completely against school choice. Thank you.
That pause, that says it all right there. Like, oh, yeah, isn't it so great? Wouldn't it be so great if we could allow the other children to bully transgender kids? Oh, whoa. Like she hit a wall. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud. Oh, I was being too honest. Oops, too open about how much I hate transgender people. Oof. I mean, again, the whole idea behind this is absolutely gross. It's dehumanizing, trying to erase these people. And of course, it's all about the cruelty. Because at the end of the day, the cruelty is the point. What a terrible teacher. Agreed. Agreed. All right. Moving on. It appears that a former Trump official has been busted for voting twice. Oops. Now, of course, this was not during a general election, but it was during a presidential primary. So let me give you the details here. Matt Mowers, a now leading Republican primary candidate, had actually voted twice in the 2016 presidential primary. So that's the Republican primary. Now, the AP reported that Mowers first cast an absentee ballot in New Hampshire's 2016 presidential primary, voting records show. At the time, Maurer served as the director of former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's presidential campaign in the pivotal early voting state. 4 months later, after Christie basically got Donkey Konged by Donald Trump, Mowers decided to cast another ballot in New Jersey's Republican presidential primary, using his parents' address to re-register in his home state, documents the Associated Press obtained through a public record request show. So he voted in New Hampshire, then he voted in New Jersey, and now he is running a campaign in New Hampshire. So now New Jersey is his home state. He hasn't actually lived in New Hampshire his entire life, or most of his life, so he's essentially a carpetbagger, which I'm sure works very, very well. People really enjoy that. But all right, so now, here's the thing. Federal law prohibits voting more than once in any general, special, or primary election. That includes casting a ballot in separate jurisdictions for an election to the same candidacy or office. Interesting. So again, he used to work for Chris Christie, then he switched over to Trump's campaign, and then after the general election, Mowers ascended to become a senior advisor in the Trump administration and even held a State Department post. Very, very important stuff. Now, this guy claims to be for voter integrity. Oh, I'm a voter integrity. Now, look, the irony here is incredibly obvious. It's painfully obvious at this point. This guy who's running in a party and members of a party who promised to fight for election integrity. Apparently he doesn't even believe in it. Oh, then again, it's okay for white Republicans to vote twice, even though they're not supposed to, impersonate their dead wife or mother. But hey, look, if a Democrat does it, if a Democrat does anything, even if they do it by mistake, well, then we've got to throw it. Not just their vote, we got to put them in prison and throw out an entire election, which is what they tried to do. Even though, again, voter fraud actually happens at a rate of a what? 0.0000014%? Something like that? I mean, you have better chances of getting struck by lightning, honestly. Such a tiny percentage of all the votes that are cast. I mean, not even close enough to sway an election. Not at all. Not at all. Now, when this story came out, reporters reached out to their campaign, and suddenly he wasn't available to talk. He really didn't have much to say. I wonder why. In a brief statement that did not address the double voting, campaign spokesman John Corbett cited Mowers' work for Trump's 2016 campaign. Quote, Matt was proud to work for President Trump as the GOP establishment was working to undermine his nomination. Matt moved for work and was able to participate in the primary in support of President Trump and serve as a delegate at a critical time for the Republican Party and country. Now, that said, we're talking about voting twice, right? So there are specific instances where you might be able to do so, and that's involved moving. So now, on that, the law's a little murky, which is interesting. Now, let's see. The AP reports that there's little chance that he will face any prosecution. The statute of limitations had passed, and there was actually no record of anyone being prosecuted under this specific section of federal election law, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, which tracks the issue. A separate New Hampshire law prohibits double voting in 2 different states, but makes an exception if someone legitimately moved his or her domicile. Well, now, all right, we don't know the details of whether or not he was actually living at his parents' house when he had registered to vote there later on. So that's why, unfortunately, they're not going to go after him. He's not going to face any sort of investigation or anything like that. And Mowers is not the latest former Trump administration official to draw a little bit of scrutiny for potentially violating voting laws. Again, which is super ironic, Mark Meadows. You know Mark Meadows? He served as Trump chief of staff and was registered in 2 different states and listed a mobile home he did not own and might have never even visited as his legal residence weeks before casting a ballot for Trump in the 2020 election. He is now under investigation. Isn't it funny, though, that when Republicans do these kinds of things, when they double vote, they take advantage of laws that are a little bit murky in order to try to vote twice, or even do straight up voter impersonation, as we've seen before, fraud, they almost never get in trouble. They almost never get in trouble. And the ones that do, and I've reported on this before, check out some of my recent, my earlier videos where I had talked about the 2-tiered justice system when it comes to voter fraud. You have, white Republicans that will do obvious voter fraud and get a slap on the wrist. And then, of course, you have people that, black people, black Democrats specifically, that are on parole and were told that they were cleared to cast their ballot. And so they did and registered to vote. And then, turns out they weren't. And they end up getting 5 to 6 years in prison over an honest mistake. So that's the situation. Now, the thing that bothers me about this is the complete and utter hypocrisy. What they're trying to do is, look, they don't care about voter fraud. No, what they consider to be fraud is people not voting for them, voting for the other side. And so what they want to do is stop and pass all of these laws to stop black people from being able to vote. And the other thing is that until they are able to restrict voting, because that's what they ultimately want to do, they're going to lie, they're going to cheat, they're going to do their own fraud and get away with it, or try to get away with it. And of course, when they are caught, and they do get caught because we do have a system that does catch voter fraud. What do you think? Do you think that Fox News and conservative media, do they cover it? Do they talk about this? They say, oh my God, look at all this voter fraud going on in the villages. Oh, look at Mark Meadows. No, they don't do a segment on it, unless of course it's Mark Meadows defending himself from the allegations. No, they don't. They put out statements like this. This is Charlie Spies, a longtime Republican election lawyer who contacted the Associated Press at request of the Mowers campaign. He called the matter, quote unquote, silly, and said the double voting was, quote, at worst a gray area of the law and not the sort of issue anybody would spend time on. Well, you know it's an issue that they shouldn't also spend time on? Non-existent mass voter fraud. Because over and over, studies, audits, all of this, reams and reams of paperwork and studies on the election have proven that there is no mass voter fraud. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But guess what? The Republican Party is obsessed with mass voter fraud. They're obsessed with it. They can't shut up about it. And you know what? It's because they're doing it. They're doing voter fraud, at least. Voting twice. Mauer's own campaign even features a section dedicated to what he calls election integrity. And it states that new rules are needed to provide every American citizen with the certainty that their vote counts. J.D. Vance put out an ad today. by the way. That ad, along with pretty much asking at the beginning, are you a racist? Do you hate Mexicans? I'm not kidding. That's literally his ad. And then goes on to talk about how they need to build Donald Trump's border wall and how millions of Democrat voters are flooding across the border. I mean, like, that's not a dog whistle. That's a human. It's not even a whistle. It's a blowhorn. I mean, they're just saying the quiet part out loud and not just saying that, they are yelling it. They're saying, yes, yes, we are racist. We are proud of being racist. We hate Mexicans. We don't want people to vote. Well, we believe in the white supremacist replacement theory that it's George Soros, which, by the way, super anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. George Soros is bringing Democrat voters over the border to take over our elections. No, it's the reason, by the way, they're not even losing elections. They're winning elections in a lot of places because they gerrymander these maps all to hell, draw their own districts, and make sure that they choose their voters instead of letting the voters choose them. And they win, and still they know that their numbers are so small that they have to pander to the worst people in the world, because the rest of the in the United States, because the rest of the people, the rest of the voting base is either super turned off, or they're essentially powerless in these districts that are being drawn to benefit Republicans. That's what's going on. It is absolutely disgusting. Screw this guy in his absolute hypocrisy on voting. Like, hey, look, either you're against fraud or you're for it. I mean, those are your rules. So why not actually practice what you preach? All right, moving on. Let's go to Florida. A Florida Republican candidate who once tried to appeal to the QAnon fringe is now trying to put some distance between himself and that group. Vice News is reporting that Drake Wirtz, who apparently is a WWE former wrestler and former ref. I'm not familiar, but okay. Now he's running for a seat in the Florida State Legislature, and he recently told QAnon, and I love this one, quote, "The storm is never coming. You guys are stupid." Good. All right, I agree. Very astute observation, Drake. Well done. You're a little late to the party, but hey, welcome. Welcome to no longer buying into this insane conspiracy theory. And by the way, if you are unfamiliar with QAnon, they believe that Democrats are running a satanic child sex trafficking ring where they drink the blood of children. Do they have any evidence? No, their evidence is, trust me, bro, there's a pizza shop somewhere. Q told me. Yeah, we had a Q dump drop somewhere. Now, the thing is that Wirtz used to promote QAnon. In fact, he had posted photos of a woman holding a flag saying WWG1 WGA, where we go one, we go all. That's a QAnon slogan. Wirtz even helped organize fundraising and awareness efforts for something called Operation Underground Railroad, an anti-trafficking organization whose CEO has legitimized certain QAnon conspiracy theories. For example, you remember when Wayfair, where they were alleging that Wayfair was a front to buy and sell children, that they were like shipping them in the shipping containers and in the furniture. What? Now, he also failed to overtly disavow QAnon in the way that other groups in the space have. Now, these conspiracy theories, they actually hurt children who are legitimately being trafficked. In fact, look, they take up time, they misdirect resources, and stop people from actually going after actual traffickers, and actually going after the root causes of some of this trafficking as well. Look, if you're looking for a shadowy cabal that could be both anywhere and everywhere and nowhere at once, interesting, well, then guess what? You're not actually looking at those who could be doing the trafficking and putting a stop to the conditions that make people vulnerable to it. And so what makes people more vulnerable, you might ask, to trafficking? Well, turns out somebody's race, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, and access to housing are all factors that can make someone more vulnerable to being trafficked. You have systemic imbalances related to identity, gender identity, even, that contribute to the vulnerability. Again, you have transgender children, LGBT folks, ethnic minorities like immigrants, and yes, especially indigenous people. They're all incredibly at risk of being trafficked than your typical white middle-class child. Now, when it happens to anyone, obviously it's horrible, but it happens to those communities far more than it happens in white suburban America. So now, that said, how do we prevent it? Well, some of you are not going to like the answer. We boost social services. We help people get out of poverty. Yeah, it actually, not being in poverty reduces your risk of being trafficked. You strengthen education in low-income communities. You ensure healthcare for everyone. You need to look at, of course, on a bigger, more macro level, you go after banks that allow for things like, money laundering. You need anti-money laundering, legislation, and you need to actually go after banks that do money launder, because how do you think these big trafficking organizations get paid? Other ways to help include mobilizing social institutions, including schools, churches, mosques, whatever, synagogues, community centers, and you mobilize these as places to support and protect vulnerable youth. You have educators, healthcare professionals, bank tellers, airline staff, whoever, right? They're all critical in identifying victims of trafficking and getting the authorities involved, the proper authorities. Now, believing in nonsense QAnon conspiracy theories about elected officials, specifically Democrats, does not get any of that fixed. It doesn't fix anything. It's lazy. And it's just political. And what they are doing is they're basically calling anyone that they disagree with on policy the worst kind of person in the world. Now, if you've been convinced that someone who might want to raise your wages and give you guaranteed health care is secretly feasting on the blood of children in the name of Satan, well, chances are you might like the policy, but you're never going to vote for that person. You're never going to support them because it's like, I can't support evil. You can't ask me to vote for evil, and this is evil. And so, no, you're going to vote for the person who's the anti-blood drinking candidate, who will likely, of course, want to lower taxes on the rich and corporations. I would argue that those are the real bloodsuckers, the wealthy and corporations. But understand that this is the modern conservative movement in a very meta way, admitting that they don't have a popular domestic agenda to run on, an economic agenda. So what they're doing is that they're pedo-jacketing the entire left. Now back to Wirtz, right? Now Wirtz, he used to attack fake news in the Marxist left after he was quote unquote canceled. Of course, because he's kind of crazy. Wirtz is also accused of leaving a WW meeting over inclusiveness and was also called out by someone else in a newsletter, Babyface versus Heel, after he liked and shared posts from Proud Boy affiliated accounts. Now, he responded in an interview with Vice, quote, "The post on Parler I liked and followed was a repost of the Proud Boys account detailing a human trafficking bust. I am not affiliated with the Proud Boys. I have met Enrique Tarrio, who founded the group, he didn't, at several conservative events before, but I'm not in close contact with him. Sure. All right, look, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Now, he then, by the way, went after QAnon, which is interesting. And he said this: it causes people to become what I call couch patriots, where they just sit on the couch, they sit on Facebook, and they don't get up and take action, take responsibility and accountability. Those kinds of theories, they only hurt the mission of ending human trafficking. Well then, great. I can't disagree. If somebody actually makes a good point that I don't agree with in a lot of, a lot of positions, if he makes a good point, I'll give him credit for it. Great, wonderful. And by the way, couch patriot. That's really good. I like that. Because it really does. I mean, let's just say that there are a lot of couch patriots on the right wing, or basically keyboard warriors, what we call them. That's exactly what a lot of these people are. Look, if you want to take a stand against human trafficking, wonderful. There are organizations that you could donate to. You can also, try to demand changes in your own life by, trying to figure out where your money is going. Look at the supply chains, right? Look at what companies you're doing business with, the banks, like I said. If there's a history of money laundering or criminal abuses that they might have or might not have gotten away with in the past. You can even look at where you're buying stuff, where you're buying your clothes. There's a lot of companies that do business and with factories that are located in countries like Vietnam or China or Nepal, places that have a history of child labor. That's the exploitation of children. And so, yes, there are some things that you can do, that you can even vote with your wallet to try to stop or put a stop to this exploitation. I mean, we've got to also, as I mentioned before, look at the root causes of these issues and try to put a stop to them. And I think taking on corporate exploitation is a big reason, a big way to do that, as well as, by the way, trying to protect sex workers. Now, I think that's really important. A lot of people do not talk about this. If you decriminalize sex work, then that means that sex workers who might be the victims of trafficking are now able to come forward without fear of being arrested, detained, imprisoned by police officers for coming forward and saying, help, I am a sex worker. I do not want to be in this position. I didn't choose to be a sex worker. I'm a trafficked worker. Please help me and do something. They don't have to fear that arrest and reprisal from those authorities. That's one positive that you can have from decriminalizing sex work. And so that and all these other things that I mentioned are things that can be done both on a local, a personal level and also at the governmental level. If you care about victims, helping the victims, and preventing this from happening, you can do all these things and push for politicians to do other things. But if you're not interested, and all you're interested in is doing cheap political points, then QAnon is, well, that's for you. Again, if Mr. Wirtz actually cares about this and is admitting, yeah, that was a mistake. I don't agree with these people, and we should actually help real organizations that combat trafficking. Well, then good on him. I'll give him credit, because we should all care about this issue, because it is real and it is a big issue. And unfortunately, groups like QAnon are just getting in the way of tackling this very real issue with nonsense bullshit. All right. Oh, no, the elites definitely are a problem. Oh, yes. And by the way, it's not just those that you point out, there are also, I don't know, groups like, or billionaires like the Kochs as well. All these different shady organizations, think tanks on the right that also do a lot of things to try to keep the working class down in order to help them by keeping their taxes down. So. All right, let's move on. Last story of the day. Oh, I was late yesterday. I'll read that when I get done with the story, actually. Members of the, let me just start that again. MAGA supporters are also supporting Russian President Vladimir Putin. That is despite him launching, of course, a war of aggression against Ukraine that has killed thousands and displaced millions of innocent people in the country. Now, recently, one Trump supporter was asked if she would prefer Vladimir Putin as president. Very interesting question. If you would prefer, or if she would prefer Putin over Biden, and why?
Who would you rather have president, Joe Biden or Vladimir Putin?
Oh, Putin. Definitely.
And why is that?
I believe he's been given a tough. Since World War II, Russia's been the bad guy, when in actuality the Nazis left Germany, and they ended up going to the Ukraine, coming in here. George Bush was actually, thank you. George Bush was actually a Nazi.
Okay. George Bush, and I'm assuming it's George H.W. Bush. He was a lot of things. Was he a Nazi? I'm not really sure. A citation needed. So look, now that said, Prescott Bush, and that's the late U.S. Senator. Well, he did have a little ties with the Nazis. In fact, he was a shareholder who profited from companies that backed the Nazis, according to files obtained by The Guardian back in 2004. The Guardian had also obtained information from newly discovered files in the U.S. National Archives that a firm of which Prescott Bush was a director was also involved with the financial architects of Nazism. All right. Now, his businesses were ultimately seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act. And so let's be fair. The Bush family, yep, they made money with the Nazis. All right. That said, you had the Koch family, the father of Charles and David Koch specifically, that helped Nazis build a major oil refinery. So here you have a history in the United States exists where you have members of the business community and right-wingers working with the Nazi Party and monetarily supporting fascism. Interesting. Now, here's the thing. Putin, also a fascist. He's shut down the press. Again, he's massively right-wing, anti-LGBTQ, hates woke culture, agreed with J.K. Rowling on cancel culture, and, of course, he's not a fan of, well, Western liberal democracy. He's also deeply corrupt. The Russian government, deeply corrupt. I don't really think Putin is somebody that you should be looking up to. And while the United States has its own problems with corruption, of course, and imperialism, and this, and that, and this, and I'm not ignoring all of that stuff, but, by the way, that kind of puts the United States in a terrible position, criticizing Russia for some of the stuff that we've done. Nonetheless, we're not doing things quite to the extent of what Russia is doing. So now, as far as Nazis are concerned, are there Nazis in Ukraine? Yeah. Yes, small group of them. The Azov Battalion, very famous for being neo-Nazis. Now, they're at most, I believe, just over 1,000 men, which were then folded into the Ukrainian military. I didn't like that. I was very uncomfortable with that. That said, Nazis, the amount of Nazis in Ukraine is a lot like the Nazi problem anywhere else. Basically, they're a small minority. And yes, they are dangerous, of course, but that their existence in that country, that does not justify an invasion by another country. I mean, that should be a very simple concept here, where, yes, turns out there are Nazis everywhere. Does that mean every country needs to be invaded? There are Nazis here in the United States. Does that mean Canada needs to invade us, or Mexico? Or do we need to invade Canada? I mean, that whole premise is ridiculous. The whole, we had to invade them to denazify them. Well, you'd have to invade just about everywhere to denazify. But all right. So that said, it doesn't excuse that invasion. It doesn't excuse the war crimes by any side. But there are reports of war crimes committed by the Russians against Ukrainian citizens. And so what this lady is that she seems to be incredibly and utterly disinformed. And I've talked about this, by the way. A lot of that has to do with the media diet that they consume. If they consume Fox News, OAN, conservative media, Tucker Carlson, who basically the Russians love Tucker Carlson. They're like, yes, he is doing our talking points for us. And whether or not he's been instructed to do those talking points, or he just does them of his own volition, he's still doing those talking points. And he is pushing Russian war propaganda, essentially. And so, look, if you're against war, okay, then you might want to stop defending Vladimir Putin. Doesn't mean you have to defend the United States or anything else. But you probably shouldn't be defending Putin either, who literally launched a full-scale war for and I believe the ultimate goal of doing a regime change war in Ukraine. Let's just, let's just not support that. Okay, war is bad. Keep it at that. All right. That's all I got. All right, so let's go and read some super chats here before we head out for the day. Let's see. Let me find today. Dango Bango with a couple of here. Super chats, thank you. MTG has never used those words until KBJ's hearing. Interesting. Pointing out right here on the record that the wording chosen by Marjorie Taylor Greene is very revealing of the Republican Party's perception of black people. Yeah, again, there's the there was that whole smear attempt against Ketanji Brown Jackson when literally her sentencing guidelines were no different than even conservative justices or judges that have ruled on similar cases. And so, again, saying that she's lenient, well, then they must believe, and they don't, because they don't say this, they don't come out and condemn it. But, I mean, following their logic, they must believe the entire justice system is skewed towards being very lenient on pedophiles. No, they're not saying that, are they? No, of course not. Of course not. They're just saying it against Ketanji Brown Jackson to say that she agrees with pedophiles and that she supports them and that she defends them and predators and all that stuff. And it's just, again, a ridiculous absolute smear. Because they really don't have anything else that they could really criticize. All right. DeSantis is protecting Matt Gaetz by halting the investigation. I'd have to look into that, but if that's true, yikes. Yikes. Very yikesy, but not surprising. Virginia Thomas says they couldn't just come out right out and call her the N-word. So yeah. Well, they certainly some certainly want to. Michael Norris, I think your question was already answered, but Mike Figueredo, host of the Humanist Report, that was the person in the J.K. Rowling story who had an awesome tweet. I thought that was fantastic. I'm all for calling out TERFs and transphobes anywhere they pop up. And finally, Gabby Mathis, thank you for the very kind $5. Really appreciate that. All right, let's go to Twitch here. Jay Harker, the Bald, 41 the Bald Dragon, resubbed for a month to tier 1. Thank you, appreciate that. And thank you for the follow, Blue Lizard Guts. Fun. W2F, I love Mike. Yeah, Mike's awesome. And that was a fantastic tweet. And of course, transphobes. Transphobes went and attacked him for calling her out. This is what left solidarity looks like. Defending people against transphobes. All right. Anyway, they sit there and scream. Yet they're the ones making laws to allow child marriage in Tennessee. Sure, protect those children so hard. They do too. Yeah, absolutely. It's total and absolute projection. All right. So that said, thank you everybody. Really, really appreciate it. Again, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. And we'll see you all tomorrow. You have a great night. Stay safe. Love you all. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you all tomorrow.
I will eat your ass.
I have not loved this conversation.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
Obama. Clean coal, meaning they're taking out coal, they're going to clean it.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.